Hey, you guys. As you can see, I'm trying to adjust my necklace. I just realized how low it is dangling. One of the great pleasures of my life that I only recently went back to is buying handmade jewelry from the artist, not from some big corporation. Now, I have some very nice pieces that I've worn for years, but they're mostly mass produced. I think I have a beautiful pair of pink sapphire earrings you see me wear all the time, but they're teeny tiny because sapphires are expensive. So I'm not even going to bother turning on my ring light today. I have enough natural sunlight. If you don't know me, I'm Suzanne Tidkmeyer. I wrote for Pathos for almost 10 years about religion. I wrote No Longer Quivering. I escaped from a cult-like church, a CULT-like church. I shouldn't even say that word because I know they'll spank me, which frustrates me to no end. YouTube, please let us say the good word, well, the good words, the real words. Let us say the real words. That's my prayer. So I've done that. The last year or so, I've just been on this thing on YouTube. And let me just start off and say, don't harass anybody I'm going to talk about because I'm going to talk about some stuff. And I know you guys don't do that. Yes, Java man, I wish the YouTube gods would let me speak real words about real things instead of this BS about you got to spell this thing out. Hey, yeah, I'm doing well, small town Jewel. Even if I haven't, I got to take this, taking any of my meds this morning. It's been kind of a crazy morning. I slept in way too late because I was up way too late last night. I hate it when I accidentally fall asleep in front of the TV at like 8 o'clock at night because when I wake up at 1 or 2, I'm never normal. Okay. So I'm pumping my main asthma drug here because I can feel my lungs. If only. Okay, so I'm right. And I want to talk about a lot of things today. As I was saying a couple days ago, I guess, I was rewatching The Righteous Gemstones, and now I am just watching season 2, and I'm pulling a lot out of it, a crazy lot. It seems like how things were done when we were children. Yes, exactly. For me, even farther. Hey, Bossy. So when I was a kid, none of these things were ever talked about. I know these things existed. The things that I talk about were more normalized then. They're not so normal now, and there are a lot of fallout, particularly things like yesterday I talked about the purity culture. Yeah, I think we're doing pretty well for the most part. I don't know about anybody else. We're having one of those good days today, whereas yesterday was not such a good day. Around, I guess, 1 or 2 o'clock, my body just said, okay, you're done with the day. So I had to just go lay down. So anyway, life with chronic illness is always a surprise. You never know what's going to happen. So that's why I've started deciding that 10 a.m. is my time. 10 a.m. is my jam because my medications haven't kicked in enough to make me goofy. I'm wide awake. I've had coffee. My brain is functioning and firing, and I'm thinking about things. So it is, hey, Michelle, so it's a good time for me. I nearly I thought about this today, but I didn't want to give without a box of Kleenex any more traffic. But I thought about doing another one on her because I think she's pulling a big scam right now. I saw the picture of her in full makeup, hugging her son, talking about maybe having COVID. And I keep telling people, I look at that picture over and over with the groomed eyebrows, the eyeshadow. I said, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm sick, you're lucky if you get my hair combed. You will see me here before when I'm sick with my hair sticking every which way, not even lipstick on, and my nightgown. So I'm thinking that she has had another strike and can't post. And rather than actually admit that, she's pretending she has COVID now, in my opinion. Okay, so I was going to say that this is all my opinion too. Don't harass anybody. I know you guys are wonderful about that. You don't harass anything, but I don't really want to have to do all this crap with YouTube, but they're insisting. Do all the YouTube things if you feel like it. If you don't, no sweat off my forehead. Okay, so we're going to get on to what I was talking about. She is always doing something, Java Man, and it's really easy. Java Man, I was going to talk about that. I wasn't going to say it exactly. Dear Lord, break the cycle is killing me. We should have known it was a matter of time to convict her own parents not loving her enough. And she was so sick, all cuddled up with me. Yeah, so sick, but wearing full makeup, cuddled up with B. So I'm not buying the full sick, the whole full sickness thing. So marriage. Those of us that have been married, we know how hard that is. Those of you who are unmarried probably have picked up on the fact that it's not always ice cream and lollipops. It has its moments. You have those moments. Anytime you put, why am I sweating so much? I just turned the AC on. Anytime you put two people together, two people with different ideas about everything, different ways of handling things, you put them together and say, okay, now you guys love each other, treat each other well. And if you add a religion into it, it can really go into some strange places. If it were a day that ends with YK, we would say, yes, 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 yes. So in her marriage, I'm just going to say this, it looks like she is the dominant partner. And there's nothing wrong with that. I want to just state that right off. Marriages, it really depends upon the partners and their needs and who they are as to whether someone is dominant, non-dominant, or equal partners. Different family of origin, absolutely the different family of origin. And your different families of origin can be, it's like I came from a bunch of drunken Cajuns with all kinds of bad things. I have an ancestor that killed his wife. I have people that have died from various substance abuse issues or had liver transplants or whatever. I have one side of the family, all the women are bipolar. Thank God I'm not. So there's all these different things we bring. And my husband has one of the most functional family of origins I've ever seen. His parents were still married right up until their deaths. There was no divorce. There was no substance abuse. There weren't very many people in the family with mental health issues. Now, of course, there are always going to be a few. So there were a few there too. They were polite, nice people. I would go to see all my husband's family in a little teeny town in Indiana. I still love those people. You get along well with them, even though they were completely different in every way, shape, and form than anything I was raised with. Sorry, I got to move my hair. I'm getting hot again. So there you go. He was lucky. I didn't have that. I had fighting, divorce, various things in my family of origin. So we're coming together as two different people with two different ideas about how everything is done. And while we were limping along, doing okay, each one of us finding our parts, we joined a CULT church that said submission only for women. Bossy, I have discovered with those with marriages where you're coming from two different places and nobody understands each other, sometimes just stopping and clearly explaining where you're coming from and what your thinking is goes a long way. Unfortunately, relationship skills like that are not taught. I've always thought maybe in high school they need to teach a adulting class, maybe college, because learning to navigate relationships, learning to balance your checkbook, there are so many very essential adulting things that we don't always get when we're growing up. I mean, we just don't. And now I'm seeing more and more kids that are not getting that. Yeah, a few ways it can work and 100 ways it won't. So I've always been the nuts and bolts person. I'm the person that either does the plumbing or calls the plumber. I am the person who works on the insurance and the taxes and all those things that have to happen. I am the person that is always thinking like 10 steps ahead about what we need to do here at the house, what we need to do in the guest house, all that. I used to do it all at my old house. Before I got really sick, I used to do the gardening. I did everything. Why? Because my husband worked in DC and it was almost a 2-hour train ride. He'd come home and collapse on the sofa, and on the weekends he'd sleep in. And I just could not burden him anymore with that. And that worked for us. Right up until, guess what? We joined our quiverful church. Then it stopped working because I bought into the lie that I'm going to talk about. It is. Learning conflict resolution is important. And I think taking anger out of the equation and being factual is an important part of learning to navigate relationships. It's just not taught anywhere, and it should be. So we joined our cult church, and I was told I had to be submissive all the time. Submissive, submissive, submissive. We're going to refer to Bill Gothard's umbrella. Jesus, God, man, husband, father, wife, and children. Oh, wow. That is crazy, bossy. But that's crazy good. So here I was trying to do something that was not natural to me. And that's why I said I can't fault without a box of Kleenex for being the dominant one in a marriage, because there has to be somebody who's dominant, who makes practical decisions, who says, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And with us, that's even more important because we're talking about building a second house and renting our entire complex here out to tourists, which looks like it may happen. So when that happens, there are some things that are just going to have to go down. Some decisions will have to be made that I know my husband that's just not his thing. And I'm looking forward to decorating a whole new house and buying all new furniture and fancy appliances and the whole thing. I cannot tell you how happy I am thinking about that, because that fills my tank. Not his, but mine. It does. Saying I want granite countertops. I want this. I want these appliances. So we're having those discussions. We're starting to have those discussions. What does a second house look like? And what should it have in it? So we're having those nice discussions right now. And one of the problems with submission is you can't have those discussions. It cuts you off at the kneecaps. One of my friends wrote this earlier. I want to read this to you. But before I do that, I want to talk about, I know yesterday I talked about the righteous gemstones. You can look at the righteous gemstones even about women's submission, because all of the women on the show are submissive, except for maybe 2 now and maybe 3 at one time. The Friends of Amber, they're all very submissive. You can tell. Dream house, bossy. Exactly. A dream house on the top of the mountain where I can breathe. Not too far from here. Top of the mountain where I can breathe and we have a sea view. Because that's something that I've really wanted for years. So we're talking about doing that. We really are, because it's something, once the rents here went insane, we started saying, hey, yeah, we should maybe think about this. So here we are. But the show, they have these very submissive women, which I found very true and quiverful when I was a member of that. Now, there are a couple that aren't. Judy Gemstone is definitely not, but she's recently married, so I'm curious to see how that's going to play out, how they're going to play it out. She's dominant but twisted. There's also Amber, who is Jesse's wife, who does the thing that I've seen in so many quiverful relationships. She pretends to submission, but she's actually a partner. She is a powerful, controlling partner in everything they're doing. You can look at them and their recent link up with the Listen Ministries and see she is a full partner in every way, shape. Are you binge watching it, Tamara? It is, hey, Shanley, it is, I've just got the biggest kick out of it. But because I see a couple of stories and I'm like, I know that happened to this church, that happened to that church, this would happen here. So finding out that he went to a sister church to the church I went to was kind of added another layer for me. And we're loving it at this household, to the point where I think I'm going to go through and pick out the quotes that make me laugh my ass off and make up t-shirts with them on, something like that. So that, and my friend Cindy and I always laugh about Weird Al, and when we compare a good-looking guy to somebody, we say, but he's no Weird Al. So I'm going to make her and I a couple of but he's no Weird Al t-shirts in the meantime. So the women in the show are very submissive. And once we joined our church, they started putting the screws to me to be submissive. I was going through quite a bit. Like I shared before, I had a child that had a chronic illness that was very serious. It could have taken her life. I was dealing with that. It was a rare one. I was dealing with the failure of a business that I had a lot of emotional invested in, but we ended up losing our shirts no matter how many hours the two of us worked. It just did not work. Things happened. So there was a lot negative going on. So I was pretty beat up emotionally coming into this. So I was starting to question everything about my life and told, you have to be submissive, 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 submissive. And I tried, but it wasn't a very natural fit for me. It never worked. Many years that I was in that church, it never worked for me. So I want to read to you something that a friend of mine wrote. I have a friend by the name of M. Dolan Hickman, Mike. He has been on the front lines of trying to remove corporal punishment from our national lexicon, just doing away with it, because Mike's father used to beat him unmercifully, and he was some type of minister, I believe it was. And so Mike came out with some very unhealthy coping things, like a lot of us do when we leave these religions. Mike has written for No Longer Quivering a few times. He's written several books. Oh yeah, Java man, neither can I. So Mike has written a book. I will link it below. That is interesting because that's what it's about. It's a novel about a kid that was being so abused that he turned to heavy metal music. So Mike wrote this morning, and while this is about children, there's some very, very, very important things you can pick out for marriages, for submissive marriages. Okay, on to Mike. Decent people realize that abused children have substantial rights relative to their abusers, but abused children generally do not know this. Okay, as decide here in the type of quiverful fundamentalism, evangelicalism I'm talking about, women don't realize this. They don't know that they actually have rights. Okay, back to what he said. In practice, many adults behave and seek to structure society to the function as if children have no rights relative to the adult figures of authority. Okay, another aside. He's talking about a structure that also seeks not just to strip away any woman's rights, but to make women and everyone else think that women have no rights at all, that this is not no rights, that you have to take whatever your husband or man throws at you. Whatever your community accepts and requires for and of kids is what abused children will believe is acceptable and required of themselves. Again, that's what happens when you are a wife and you're abused. You're a submissive wife. They want acceptance and requirements for women to be submissive. That means that most places, abused children experience constant intense pressure from all adults to respect and obey their abusers. Again, that's something that these types of religions seek to do to women. They have to respect and obey their authorities, their abusers. Abused children are told not to question their abuser's authority, not even to resist the abuser's demands, to never talk back, to never entertain the thought that their abuser could possibly be wrong about anything. Okay, that's very much what the IBLP and other CULT churches teach as far as submission of women. Disclosures of abuse are dismissed as children's resistance to authorities, not just sometimes, but more often than not. For child abuse to be prevented, we have to stand up for the substantial rights of all children in all times and places, including in our own homes. Love you, Mike. That was beautiful. That's right up there with what I'm talking about today with women in Quiverful and beyond. I know that's where they're taking this is where this is going. They are taking that from that one piece of scripture and they're extrapolating out with it. They are coming up with their own little stupidity with that, and it just goes weird. I'm just going to say it. It just goes in some weird places when you do that. Weird, abusive places. And it's kind of dehumanizing. The way that women and children are treated as far as submission goes, one of the main points of how they treat is they want to dehumanize, because if they can dehumanize you, they can abuse you. They can do all sorts of manner of things to you. They can put restrictive rules on you. They can, the list is endless of what they can do to you. And some of these marriages, the submission they teach, you're not allowed even to say anything if you're being abused. You just have to look at the books of people like Debbie Pearl. I don't even want to say the other one's name, The Power of the Transformed Wife. I don't even want to say her name because she has got the craziest fangirls on the planet. Nancy Campbell. So many of these writers say you have no rights to your feelings. You just need to not react. You need to be smiling, submissive all the time. That leads to being abused. I'm convinced of it, because the more of your own rights you give away, and I'm not saying to fight with your husband, not at all, because in a lot of these marriages with these women I've seen, this is one of the reasons why they drag them into theology like Quiverful. They can't cope with the fact that the marriage is broken, and the only way they can see to fix it is to drag everybody into this extreme thought theology where they don't have to do anything but pray right, submit right. And if they pray right, submit right, then God will change the husband to a godly man and the entire relationship will be fixed. That's not how any of this works, as they say in that stupid ad. That's not how any of this works. And here's the bad side of it. If you fail in some way, shape, or form, say your husband decides that your church is wrong and he's leaving, can you guess what everyone else will say? They will tell you, well, you weren't submitting the right way. You weren't submitting hard enough. You weren't a godly woman. If you'd have been a godly woman, if you'd been praying enough, if you'd been praying the right way, you'd have been submissive enough. If you'd been submissive the right way, then your husband wouldn't have left the church or done anything else outside the realm of what he was supposed to do. So not only do they put the entire onus for the relationship on the woman, but if the relationship doesn't go according to ABC, according to them, then they put all the blame back on the woman for the relationship. And I'm just going to say, relationships that fail, there is usually some fault on each side. Now, whether that shifting fault is 5%, 95%, or 50-50, that's open up for interpretation. Oh, Lordy, my husband just walked past in his underwear throwing throwing fallen palm branches over the wall. So that's a distraction. So I want to say that about marriages post submission. You have to just let your person be who they are. They want to walk around the yard in their underwear, let them. They're not harming anybody, and they're definitely not harming you. So I think that's a big thing that submissive marriages miss. They don't let anybody be who they truly are. They will lock you into these strict gender roles. And there's no way to escape them. Everybody's looking at you, everybody's judging the quality of what's going on. So unless you have slapped on your fake smiling face, none of this is going to hit. This is all going to be, this is how we overcome, this is how we overcome, we submit. So, and we're talking about submission on the littlest things. Say you wanted to buy, I don't know, 2 yards of fabric to make a skirt or a jumper or something. In these submitted relationships, in these little CULT churches, you have to turn to your husband and say, hey, can I have $10 for fabric? And if you look at these relationships, a lot of times they're buying the lie that the husband has to work and only certain home-based things. So he's not making much money. So you asking for $10 to buy a piece of fabric may be huge. It may be a big budget buster. Not allowed to work. So it doesn't work just now for wives. It doesn't work for anybody. It just makes things, you can't take responsibility for someone else. Absolutely. And you can't manipulate them. You can't manipulate them into change. You can't manipulate them to your expectations. The only thing you can do that is, I've always found helpful, is to talk about it in rational, unangry voices. Now, that's not always possible, and I admit that too. I sometimes snap and yell. We all do. It's human. But rather than flip it out and that's the devil, no. So, and the thing with relationships too, that they don't understand, that there's no latitude for in these submissive relationships, is that life is change. Life really is change. And what serves you one day may not the next. Changing circumstances, all kinds of things. I mean, look at where we are now. We're in the middle of a pandemic still. And I'm watching people having very strained relationships due to any number of things. And there's no compromise. There's just people losing their mind. There's just people losing their mind, coming up with all kinds of goofy things. I mean, yesterday we had to deal with a disagreement in our marriage because our friend wanted ivermectin for her COVID. I am very much against giving somebody horse dewormer. Very, very, very much against it. When it's been proven it doesn't work. My husband is against it too, but he's not against doing something that somebody else wants. He's more the people pleaser than I am. So I just said, I am not involved in this at all. And he said, fine, I'll buy it for her. So that's how it went down. I thought at the beginning of the pandemic, this was going to lead to a rise in divorce rates. Java man, I was sure of that too. In fact, I told somebody, I said, I bet anything there's going to be a higher divorce rate. Because, and I can tell you this, because when my husband retired, this was a struggle for me. And this was me not being submissive anymore. When you have your own thing, you're writing every day and you're doing this and that and the other thing, and you're going hither and yon and you're doing stuff, you are not necessarily wanting that disrupted. When my husband retired and was with me 24/7 after years of riding the train into DC and working long hours, it was a big shock. And if you look at divorce rates among retirees, are extremely high. Why? Because you have a paradigm shift. You have a shift in the entire relationship. You have people that are used to doing this and this now doing this together. And if you can adjust to that, you can keep your marriage intact, but people can't always do that when there's that significant of a change. And I think that's the same thing with Quiverful. A gray divorce. Oh, that's interesting. When I divorced my ex-husband, because I was married before for a very short period of time, and it was a disaster all the way around. Neither one of us were mature enough to be married, even though he was considerably older than I. There was just too much going on. It just never worked for us. You know, you had infidelity and drugs and other things and the infidelity wasn't on my side. And I was trying to be submissive because he really wanted a very submissive younger woman that was going to do what he wanted. It just did not work. Even then, I wasn't submissive, but I was pretty heartbroken when it all fell apart. And I paid the munificent fund of $300 to get my divorce. It was back in 1979, I think. So $9.99 for a gray divorce. That's interesting. We were going to make it through the wasn't working. We're on top of each other in a 500 square foot apartment in Boston. He had the blues from not working. Bossy, that's a whole different thing too, because those things happen. We can't control those circumstances of life. Maybe somebody gets ill. I mean, that has been a hard thing for us. When I became ill for the first time, really seriously ill, he wasn't used to that. He was used to me being well and saying, okay, I'm going to grumble the whole time we're going up White Oak Canyon and swimming in the waterfalls, but I'll do it. To having somebody who couldn't do those things anymore that was another big paradigm shift. Not everybody can make that. I've read statistics on women that come down with chronic illnesses that their marriages do not survive. It's a very high number. You know, you get married, you think that that circumstance is going to be that circumstance forever. And it's not. You hit the bumps in the road. You have a sick child. You become sick. You never see your husband because he's working all these crazy hours. There are a lot of road bumps that could come out. There's a Christian song that I like by Audio Adrenaline that one of the lyrics says, it's not the straightaway, but it's the bumps and curves that kill. There's a lot of truth to that. It can kill marriages, it can kill people, all sorts of things. And you don't mean it many times, but when you have situations like the pandemic, various other things, heightened emotions, powerlessness, great feelings of great powerlessness. That was the main thing I remember from when I was, quote, submitting wife. And most of the submitting wives I knew had ways to get around the husband and or manipulate the husband into doing what they wanted to do. I came to the conclusion that a lot of submissive wives were not so submissive. They had great subterfuge and manipulation skills, the ones that managed to survive intact. Now, I've talked about before, there are a number of them that just died off. They died off of easily preventable illnesses. And I have to think that if you are in a marriage where you are told that you do not matter, that only your submission to a man can buy you a spot in heaven, then you're really not going to do stuff that you would normally do, where you have healthy self-esteem, where you're going to go to the doctor and get a pap smear. You're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to take your vitamins, you're going to eat your Wheaties, and you start thinking that you don't matter, that you're fungible. And when women end up dying from that in submissive relationships. It's funny you said, yeah. So became disabled a few years in our relationship, and I reminded myself of how selflessly he was there for me and knew it was my time to be there for him. That's bossy. That's exactly right. But that's not normal in most of these relationships. Most of the time, that wrecks people. We've been managed to surmount it, but it hasn't always been easy. And there's still sometimes he doesn't understand. He says, why can't they fix you? There's no fixing this dude. If you read about the face stations, they say the way to breed murderous feelings is to enclose two people in a small confined space. There's got to be truth to that, because all you have to do is look at Investigation Discovery, and they have all these shows like Wives with Knives was one of them I saw. I just laughed at the title. Wives with Knives, and all these murder shows. And every now and then I would watch those murder shows and I would say, wait a minute, that's a quiverful family. That is what you are not understanding about this. You are freaking out over this murder because you don't understand this is a quiverful family. And this is a mother who has been pushed with this theology that she has no rights, she has no needs. It's all submission being poured out as a drink offering for your husband, your children, your community. You have no time to yourself and you snap. And I have seen women snap. It happens. Just look at the Andrea Yates trial. She killed her children. She was a fully submitting, quiverful mama that just lost it. She had instead of postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis. And she had a tendency towards depression, and they were told not to have any more children, but they did it anyway. And it had very tragic consequences. I understand that Rusty Yates got remarried and had a bunch more children. It's just gross. He's still following the same thing, even though he was trying to claim that he was not the one dragging the family into this theology. Clearly, that was a lie. So if you put people into very strict, tight gender roles that are not natural to them, that they cannot possibly fulfill all the time, sad things happen. I mean, and occasionally it's a sad thing happening. A person just loses her mind and runs off. That does happen too. My dad is in the first stages of dementia. He and my mom are not doing well. His mother died recently, and he and one of her nurses flirted and continue to do so. But my parents fought all my life. My parents fought all their life, my life too, until they divorced. And then they still fought. I'm so sorry to hear that, Jazzy. You know, if he has dementia, he needs to be protected from himself. But sadly, your mother is going to have to. Your mother is going to have to assume more roles. And that's something that you're seeing in the older generations where women are just not so good to taking over these roles because they haven't been taught that they have to do this. They don't know any better. Yeah, I'm very sorry that you had to put up with that, Jazzy, but I know that feeling. And your father. I don't even know what to tell you. When the dementia hits, it's a wicked thing. It robs people of who they are. And that could be really hard to deal with. I saw with my mother-in-law all the pain she went through when her husband, my father-in-law, didn't develop dementia. He had a stroke and a heart attack and just never regained the ability to speak or do any of the stuff he did. And this is a brilliant man. This is a guy who was a dean at a university for years and years and created a vet school at one place and went and taught in Russia, taught in St. Kitts. He taught all over the world. Brilliant guy. Reduced to being a small child again. And it was hard to watch. And you could look at him and see the frustration because his mind was all there. He just could not make it function. What is it with you guys today? What is it with you stupid Russian spammers? Like, I don't know how many one that has shown up. So the very nature of life has changed, I guess is what I'm trying to say. We have to readjust our roles all the time. We have to consider, is the relationship worth saving? What are our time together? All of that. I find that I judge people a lot less for the divorces now that I've been out of the church for a long time, because I understand there's times and there are things when it just becomes more than you can handle. And when that happens, you have to look at the options. You have to look at, can I adjust to this, or is it time to cut my losses and run? And sadly, there are those times when it is absolutely appropriate. We are all human and never know what tomorrow will bring. Absolutely. Java man, I don't even know. That's what's so weird about it. It's when they're doing that in comments, they're putting a link to porn sites. So that I'm not even sure, but it's like, you got to be kidding me. Why are you doing this nonsense? A little side ramble on Russian bots and Russian spammers. I used to have to deal with that almost every day at NLQ for many years, especially in the run up to elections. There were tons of Russian spam bots that would show up and would copy people's comments and recomment and put in a link to not a porn site, but to political falsehoods. I guess is the best way to say that. Dad is in denial and mom doesn't know how to deal with life. Jazzy, that is a really, really tough situation for you to be put in, because I know you will probably be the one stepping in. And it's tragic. Like I said, I have a girlfriend here who her husband left her like 18 months ago, and she is not coping well. She's always been a submissive woman. She's been a submissive religious woman. She was raised that way in her father's care and then handed over to her husband. Her husband decided he had had enough of being her keeper and was like, peace out. And he's now in Texas, I think it is, with the girlfriend. And she's here alone. She didn't know what the heck she's doing. She had her motor on her car die. And they said, well, there's no oil and there's no water in here. I just say, did you bother checking that? And she said, I'm a woman. I don't know how to do those things. Please, 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 if I can urge you to do anything, learn how to cope with your life without somebody else. Learn those skills, even if you never have to use them. Learn those skills. Make sure you have your own separate credit. You never know. When my father-in-law died, my mother-in-law discovered they closed all of their credit accounts because she didn't have any credit history except what little she had with him. There are steps we as women can take to make sure that no matter what happens, we're fine. Political propaganda. I never really understood that until these elections. Maybe she did job a man. Maybe she got caught buying subs. There's so many different things. That would be pretty awesome. I don't know anybody that does actual mechanics on their car. I used to back in the days when I was a starving student. There was a difference between spending $40 for a car part and putting it in myself and paying some mechanic $200 I didn't have. That was the only time I ever really did that. But I learned the basic skills I needed to be able to get it done and do it and make everything work. And I don't wish that time on anybody. That was a pretty terrible time in my life because I had no money. It was a constant game of, do I pay the electric bill? Do I buy books for my classes? It was that. And in the submissive religious things, the biggest lie they like to push to promote what they're doing is they say that feminism has ruined women, and so has education. They don't want you to be educated. They don't want you to understand how to balance your own checkbook or how to replace your own carburetor. They don't want you doing any of that. That's a man's thing he does. And it doesn't allow for any kind of individuality. It doesn't allow for personalities. It does not allow for anything. You just get locked in these straight little boxes. And people don't do well as one of a zillion. AJ called a woman who wanted to give her son pizza a murderer. Remember that? No, I don't, but I don't doubt it. Yeah, she thinks she's sick and cuddling up with her son. Can say the same about herself now. Bossy, I saw that. And I was speaking at the beginning about that. She had a full face of makeup. She had eyeshadow. She had on her brows, which she doesn't normally wear. She was cuddling up to him hard, trying to say that she's sick. I don't believe she's sick. I believe that she may have gotten another strike and not be able to use YouTube. And she's using the excuse that she has COVID. She's not very truthful about anything, so I don't believe it. I always have my oil changed. The reason is they handle disposal of it. They have specialized tools for it, and they can do it like 15 minutes. Java man, I'm the same way. When I do that, I have it done because I've just reached a point in my life where I'm going to have that done. If I had to, I could probably do it in a pinch, but, or at least I'd look it up online and figure it out how to do it. But I always have the guys at the service station where we get our gas, check oil levels, check coolant levels. I always do that because it's important to maintain the health of your car. And I want my car to last forever. I don't want to be buying another one. KJ is not known for consistency, rather for the lack of. Yeah, she sure is. And she fits the cult. So there's that. I got my doctorate and never married. You can imagine what the evangelicals think of me. Oh, I'm sure they're saying that you're some kind of feminist Jezebel. Good for you, Jazzy. I know a lot of women who have done those things, and whatever works for you. I doubt they teach finances, taxes to women in homeschooling. Bossy, no, they don't. In fact, when I get around to doing a review of the book, The Power of the Transformed Life, there is a chapter in there on finances where the author said two things that she talked about with family finances. Never have credit cards and buy used. Those were her only two financial tips. So when I wrote a review of it, I actually said, this is bad advice. And then I went on to give good advice. And I gave, this is probably the longest article I wrote for NLQ, but I broke down how to use credit and how to use finances to better yourself, to improve your situation, because there's always things you can do that will help unless you're at the rock bottom with Quiverful. And the great irony of this woman giving any kind of financial advice is that they're quite wealthy. They live in a wealthy suburb of San Diego. So she doesn't handle any money. She doesn't have any idea how to handle any of that. I don't handle that anymore, but I have. I know how to do it if I have to. A good video on her. Yeah, Jazzy, I'm sure she did. But I'm sure that Jen has not gotten spammed by that woman's husband like I have. He even tried to reach out to my husband and say, control your wife. That falls in with the whole submissive stuff. And he did it on a night when my husband was just horribly sick with some kind of stomach flu. And my husband came to me and said, there's some idiot trying to message me, claiming that you're defaming his wife. Go take care of him. So I went and said, look, I'm not defaming your wife. I'm using her own words. And that was it. Credit cards are good if you pay off the balance in full every month. Exactly, Java Man. There are benefits. You have to be able to know what you're doing and how to do it. And if you know how to do it, you can make money doing it. I've talked about that with my credit cards. I've been able to get premiums. Like when I took my Amazon credit card, I got $100 just for doing that. And I've actually used it a fair amount because it's got some good benefits. But there are others I've taken to get the discount or the big thing and not use maybe more than one or twice. Oh, hey, Sunny Side Up. You won't want to get married at all. Well, all I can say is I told my daughters, don't get married till I'm 30. And one of them stuck with that, and she's about to get married. Her husband is awful, Jazzy. He's nasty. He is nasty, nasty, nasty. He says all kinds of threatening things. He still chases me around. He's tried to post on my YouTube channel here a number of times. He still goes to NLQ and tries to talk to me. He's tried to send me emails. It's just disgusting. And I keep getting reports from women that he has contacted them wanting to talk to them over coffee or lunch. I don't know how true that is, but it seems to be something that a lot of people are saying. And I think that's not a good thing. If your spouse is doing that stuff, you should probably deal with it, regardless of who is doing it. Do you have any updates on her health? No, I haven't heard anything. The last I heard, she was having a brain tumor again, and they were dealing with it. And that was the point I quit covering her for no longer quivering. I've barely mentioned her here. Because while her theology is awful, I don't want to torture somebody. I don't want to say ugly things about somebody who is dealing with a health crisis. I don't want to add to whatever their anxiety levels are. So I have barely talked about her in all that time. Java man, I hate to hear that because that's what I use when I come to the States. I use my credit card insurance to be able to rent a car because I don't live in the States anymore. So I can't rent a car. Exactly. We all do what works for ourselves. Why feel guilty about that? That was at least a year ago. I know that. A year ago. I know it was. And we haven't heard anything more. I think I read something where she was talking about she'd had the treatment, it was successful. I don't know. I just know if you're getting brain tumors again and again and again, it can't possibly be a good thing. And I'm going to say this. Part of me wonders if that was responsible for a personality change. Because you could look at her old blog and she wasn't so bad. But as time has gone on and she's had health issues, her words have just gotten more woman blaming and worse, very worse. And I'm wondering if what we're dealing with, if we're seeing some kind of brain damage that we're dealing with, because everything I keep reading about brain damage, even strokes, it says your personality changes. And I'm definitely going to check that Java man because that's an important thing for me. I have to be able to rent a car when I go to the U.S. because I don't have a car there anymore. Everything is here. We sold off everything and do that. So anyway, I'm going to go. So we've talked about why submission is rarely a good thing, and I've never seen it actually work out for anybody. Even the ones that say it's working out, I watch them manipulate their husbands. I watch them be unhappy. I watch them spin. And it's just not a natural state for anybody. Marriages work when we're allowed to be who we are, when we're allowed to use our talents and the things that we do well, and not forced to do the things we don't do well. For me, being a submissive wife it was pretty horrible. It didn't work. Liz, I know it did. I know it did. It affects so many people. After I had my stroke, I got kind of cranky with my husband a few times, and that can change your personality. I was describing it's like, how if you have a extension cord and it's got the nice insulation and you plug in the wall, everything works right. Well, what happens when you take a knife and you cut away the insulation you try to plug it in? It starts sparking and reacting. It's kind of how it is with a stroke, is it tends to just strip the insulation away from some of your nerves, and things in the past you could just in one ear and out the other. You might turn around and beat somebody up verbally for that. So I try to keep that in mind. I try to keep it a short offense list. I try to hold grudges, try to forgive people for their stuff and all of that sort of thing. Get your education or travel or pursue your passions. And that's exactly right, Jazzy. I just want to throw that out there. Not everybody needs to get married. I didn't think I would. I didn't think I would remarry after my first time, but I eventually did. So there's that. Do what works for you. Be happy. Enjoy yourself. Don't let anybody tell you got to fit in this tiny little box because that never works. Love you guys. I'm going to have to go. It's getting kind of late.